Hey guys, tonight we're going back to a time when life didn't just hand you lemons, it hit you in the face with a moldy turnip. You're waking up in a damp, smoky, dirt-floored hut on the edge of a medieval French village, nestled somewhere between forgotten by God and still owes tithes. The straw beneath you itches like fire ants, crawling with fleas and the occasional mouse. Your blanket, just a piece of old wool shared with two siblings, a goat, and that one chicken that won't stop pecking your toes. You can hear the rooster outside, but you didn't need him to wake you. The cold does that just fine. Your breath fogs in the air. There's a faint scent of manure, smoke, and yesterday's stew, or maybe that was 2 days ago. You stretch, and every joint complains. You've got that same dull ache in your shoulders from carrying water back from the well, and your hands are already stained with dirt, even though you haven't stepped outside yet. You probably won't survive this, to be honest. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. Let's see who else is up way past bedtime. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your feet hit the packed earth floor, cold, hard, and slightly uneven, just like your prospects. There's no glass in the window, just a shutter you prop open with a stick. Outside, the sun is barely nudging the horizon, casting everything in a bluish mist. Smoke coils from a few rooftops, but there's no real sense of peace here, only urgency. You pull on your tunic. It's rough, made of coarse wool, and smells like smoke, old sweat, and wet dog, probably because it doubles as your pillow, towel, and raincoat. You fasten a belt around your waist, a piece of twine, really, then splash your face with cold water from a cracked clay bowl. No soap. Soap's a luxury. You've heard the Lord's steward uses it, but for you, water does the job, mostly. The village stirs slowly. Other huts are just as crooked as yours, their thatched roofs sagging like tired eyebrows. Some lean into each other like old friends holding one another up. The ground outside is a churned mess of mud and animal droppings. Ducks waddle through it like they own the place, and maybe they do. Ducks get fed, you get taxed. You pass your neighbor, Jahan. He's already got his back bent over a pile of firewood. His fingers are black with soot, and his beard is a bristling hedge of frost and crumbs. He nods, says nothing, talking wastes breath. The baker's wife is out front, stoking her oven. You can already smell the warm, yeasty promise of bread, but you'll likely get none of it today. The Lord's men get first pick, if there's any left. Maybe you'll trade an egg or two for a hunk. The path through the village is more of a suggestion than a road. Your feet sink into the muck, and you nearly slip when a pig dashes past, squealing as a boy chases it with a stick. You sidestep a pile of horse dung and nod to a passing monk, who's already muttering prayers and pretending not to notice the farmer relieving himself behind the barn. Your first task of the day? Muck the byre. That's where the cow lives. Your cow, if you're lucky, or someone else's, if you're employed. It's dark inside, the air thick with the scent of ammonia and old hay. You grab a wooden pitchfork and get to work. The muck is heavy, wet, and clings to the tines like it's got ambitions of its own. Your breath fogs again. The cow watches you with blank disinterest. Once that's done, you trudge to the fields. They're half frozen and stubborn as a mule. You swing your mattock to break the crust, each strike sending vibrations up your arms. The soil here isn't generous. It gives grudgingly, and only if you coax it with sweat and curses. You think of the Romans, how they once marched through this land with their roads and their wine and their sandals. Historians still argue whether their farming methods were more efficient, or if they just had better weather and more slaves. By midday, You're half deaf from the wind and your own stomach growling. You pause. Eat a lump of coarse bread you brought from home. It's dry, dense, and tastes faintly of smoke and sourness. You chew slowly, saving the smaller half for later. Some peasants mix ground beans or even sawdust into their bread to stretch it. Others just go without. One winter, your cousin ate boiled nettles and thought it a feast. A group of women pass by, headed to the river with baskets of laundry. Their chatter carries on the wind, mingling with the rhythmic slap of cloth against rock. You once heard someone say the Lord's daughter bathes in rosewater. You haven't even seen a rose back at your hut. Your family's been tending the garden, a few onions, some leeks, maybe a withered cabbage. The goat's gotten into the turnips again, and your youngest brother is covered in mud, giggling like it's a good thing. Your mother wipes her hands on her apron and gives you a once-over. No broken bones, no blood. Then you're fine. As evening falls, the cold creeps back in. The fire inside is little more than a glow. You pile on some sticks, small ones, carefully hoarded, and the room fills with a smoky warmth. The smoke rises lazily, filtering out through a hole in the roof. Your eyes sting. Everyone huddles close. No one speaks much. Words are for prayer, or argument, or songs you don't remember the endings to. Tonight, like every night, you sleep in your clothes. The straw pokes through the blanket. Someone snores, someone else coughs. Outside, an owl hoots, and a dog barks at something unseen. The stars above twinkle coldly, indifferent. And you? You drift into a restless sleep, already halfway to tomorrow's aches. You wake with a start, not from a bad dream, but because your stomach feels like it's gnawing on itself. Again, hunger isn't dramatic, it's dull, constant, and mean. Your body has grown used to scraping by, but it still hopes. Hopes that maybe today there will be a little more than yesterday. Maybe today your bread won't be mostly husk and mildew. Breakfast, if you can call it that, is a chunk of barley bread left over from 2 days ago. It's hard enough to double as a weapon and dry enough to make your mouth feel like the village ash pit. You gnaw on it anyway, slowly, so it lasts longer. Bread is life out here. Black bread for the poor, white bread for the rich. Though you've never actually seen white bread up close. You've heard rumors it tastes like clouds. Today's plan, like most days, revolves around food. You think about it constantly. Will the hens lay? Has that trap near the stream caught anything? Can you stretch the dried peas for another pot of gruel? That's your culinary vocabulary. Porridge, gruel, pottage, and maybe some cheese, if the cow's been generous and the curds cooperated. Fancy cuisine, right? You shuffle outside and glance over at your neighbor's cottage. Their roof has caved in slightly, but smoke is rising from their chimney. That's a good sign. Someone's boiling something. Once, in a harsh winter, a nearby village reportedly boiled bark for soup. You're not sure how true that is, but you believe it. Hunger makes you creative and desperate. You've also seen what hunger does when it goes too far. That one spring when the crops failed, people were eating nettles, roots, even shoe leather. There's a story, half whispered, about a man who boiled his cat. You don't ask questions when someone offers meat stew anymore. On feast days, there's a chance of meat, usually salted pork or fish if you're near a river. But most days you chew on boiled beans and wild herbs. A lucky forager might find mushrooms, though people argue over which ones are edible and which ones make you see dancing skeletons in your dreams. Historians still debate just how much fungi-induced hallucination influenced medieval spirituality. One theory suggests certain ecstatic religious visions might have just been a bad mushroom trip or divine inspiration. Hard to say. Lunch comes late, if it comes at all. You might heat up some leftover pottage, a thick mush of lentils, peas, Maybe a scrap of bacon fat if someone was generous or distracted. You eat from a shared wooden bowl, using a spoon carved by your grandfather, who you think once tried to be a monk but didn't make it past the wine cellar. You've eaten the same thing so many times, you could recognize it blindfolded, which is helpful, since sometimes it's too dark in the hut to see what you're eating anyway. Your younger siblings shovel it down like it's a feast. You pretend it tastes good. You want them to believe food is joy, even when your own teeth ache from grinding against stone particles in the bread. That happens often because millstones wear down, and flour ends up with a bit of gravel in it. You've probably chipped a molar on your lunch and never even noticed. You sit for a while near the hearth, letting the fire warm your boots, which are more hole than shoe. Your toes peek through the gaps like curious little ghosts. They've seen better days. So have you. Your cousin once tried fasting during Lent, went all in, real devout, and fainted on day 3. Fasting isn't exactly optional in a place where food's already scarce, but religion finds a way to make it feel noble. The priest said it brought him closer to God. You're not sure. It mostly brought him closer to face-planting into a cowpat. You remember one summer feast day when the entire village shared a roasted pig. There was dancing, laughter, and a girl with hair like river reeds. You watched her eat an apple, slowly, as though it were the richest treasure in the kingdom. You never spoke to her. She married a cooper 2 villages over. You sometimes think about that apple. As the afternoon wanes, you gather what you can, a few withered carrots from the garden, some chickweed. Your aunt swears it's good in a stew. You're not so sure. But she's missing 3 teeth and still beats you at arm wrestling. So you trust her judgment. A passing tinker trades you a bit of smoked fish for your last egg. It smells fishy in every sense, but it's food. You wave him off and stash the fish in a cloth under the hearth. If it lasts till morning, it'll be a miracle. Even the smell of food is currency here. You can tell who's boiling cabbage, who got into the larder, who's managed to buy a strip of bacon. It travels on the breeze and fuels envy like wildfire. Once, a fight broke out over a turnip that rolled into the wrong garden. You didn't laugh then, but you do now, quietly. And then there's salt. Salt is gold. Salt means flavor, means preservation, means you might survive winter. The Lord controls the salt trade, of course, and taxes it. You use it sparingly, like someone casting spells. A pinch for the pot, maybe 2 if it's a holy day, maybe by dusk. Your stomach is empty again. Dinner is another round of pottage, now thinner and stretchier than before. You sip it slowly. It tastes of wood ash, faint herbs, and humility. You say a short prayer, not for thanks, more like a bribe. Please, just one more day without famine. You glance up at the ceiling. You swear you see the stars through the thatch. Maybe you're hallucinating, or maybe the roof just needs patching. Again, you crawl into bed, where the air smells like wool and feet. The hunger pangs are softer now, not gone, just patient. They'll wait till morning. The rooster crows, and you curse him silently. Of course, out loud would just wake the baby and bring your mother's wrath. You roll over and immediately regret it. The air inside your hut is icy, and the moisture from your breath has crusted on the inside of your nostrils. Your back sticks to the damp straw, and your elbow hits something solid and furry. The goat again, outside. It's foggy and gray. A heavy mist clings to the fields, and the smell of the village is already in full swing. Dung, wet wool, smoke, and something indefinably sour that always lingers around the latrine trench. You take a deep breath through your mouth and prepare for the daily ritual that is trying not to die of filth. Bathing? Well, that's a festival kind of activity. Maybe once or twice a year, if there's a reason, like marriage, or fleas so bad you start dreaming about them. Today's wash is a handful of freezing water splashed on your face. You grimace. Your hands are already numb, and you haven't even touched the sheep trough yet. The water you use comes from the communal well, or from a bucket filled by your younger brother, who swears it didn't have a frog in it this time. The well's water tastes old, not foul, but not fresh either. It has a strange, chalky tang, and every so often someone gets sick from it. You boil it if you have time. You almost never have time. The truth is, clean water is a myth. It starts out clean, maybe, but by the time you've hauled it up in a wooden bucket with frayed rope, carried it across the muddy commons dodging livestock, and poured it into a pot that may or may not have been used to store pickled eels last month, it's acquired character and bacteria, but mostly character. There's no sewage system. Of course, waste goes into trenches, or just out the back door if you're in a hurry. You don't have a privy. You have a spot. So does everyone else. You try to avoid each other's spots. You don't always succeed. The pigs are helpful in their own awful way. They eat anything, leftover stew, gone, rotten bread, devoured. That weird thing you found near the compost heap that you hoped was a turnip, also gone. Pigs are walking stomachs, and they're cleaner than you'd expect, which says more about you than it does about them. Fleas are a constant companion. You scratch in your sleep. You scratch while working. You scratch during prayer and pretend it's a stretch. Everyone's got them. The village priest once delivered a sermon with a visible flea parade marching down his robes. No one mentioned it, because if the priest is scratching, what hope do you have? And lice. Oh, the lice. They live in your hair, in your tunic, even in the seams of your blanket. You once burned a tunic just to be sure they were gone. Spoiler, they weren't. One girl in your village tried shaving her head, but people said that invited demons, so she wore a scarf and prayed a lot. Historians still argue whether medieval people truly believed lice were divine punishment or just shrugged and lived with them because they had no better options. You've tried everything. Ash rubbed into your scalp. Onion juice. Rubbing yourself down with lavender when you can find it, which is almost never. Your aunt once suggested crocodile dung. You're pretty sure she was joking. Pretty sure. The local bathhouse, when it's open, is mostly just a big wooden tub where everyone takes turns sitting in increasingly murky water. Modesty's a myth when your neighbor's feet are brushing your thigh and the water smells like boiled cabbage. You went once. You left feeling wetter, not cleaner. Never again. The wealthier folks have private tubs and scented oils. They also think you smell like death. You do. But so do they, under all the rosemary and lye soap. It's just a fancier kind of stink. Tooth care, a mystery. You chew on mint leaves if you're lucky, a twig if you're desperate. Some people rub their gums with ashes. Your grandfather said he once met a man with all his teeth at age 40. You assume he was a wizard. You don't think about germs. Germs haven't been invented yet, or at least no one's explained them to you. Disease is either bad air, bad luck, or God being mad. Maybe all three. When your sister got the fever, the village healer hung a dead mole above her door. It didn't help. But now you have a very dry mole. Every scratch could be the start of something worse. You remember when Claude, the miller's boy, skinned his knee and it turned black by the next market day. They say he saw angels before he died. You hope they gave him shoes. He never had any. The worst part is how normal all this feels. You've never known anything else. The dirt under your nails, the constant layer of grime on your skin, the oily tang of smoke and sweat in your clothes. It's just life, just sticky, itchy, rank life. You pass by the village stream on your way to gather kindling. There's a woman kneeling at the bank, scrubbing linens with soapwort and muttering to herself. Her arms are red from cold. The water runs brown from the fabric, and you know she'll hang them on a bush to dry. where birds will probably poop on them again. The kids splash nearby, shrieking with laughter. You envy their ability to find joy in anything. You know that by the time they're 10. They'll be too busy hauling water or chasing geese to laugh like that anymore. And yet, despite everything, there's something familiar here. The rhythm of it all, the clank of pails, the shuffle of bare feet in mud, the drone of flies. Even the stink becomes a kind of comfort. If the village ever smelled clean, you'd probably panic. You end the day with your arms caked in muck, your face streaked with soot, and your feet numb from wading through half-frozen puddles. But you made it, somehow, and tomorrow, you'll do it all again. You stand by the field at dawn, watching your breath fog in the air, and you remember it's rent day. Your gut tightens. Not because you've forgotten, how could you, but because you've got exactly 4 eggs, a crooked bundle of carrots, and whatever dignity you've managed to scrape together since last month. Spoiler, it's not much. You live on land that isn't yours. Every stalk of grain, every turnip, every chicken that clucks too loud, it all belongs to the Lord. You're a peasant, or more precisely, a serf. That word might sound neutral to future ears, but in your world, it means you're legally tied to this patch of earth like a goat on a fraying rope. You can't leave, not without permission. You can't refuse your obligations, not unless you're fond of being publicly flogged, fined, or both. You trudge toward the manor with your offerings bundled in a basket, and your feet drag more with each step. The path curves past the church, where the priest gives you a stiff nod. You nod back, mostly out of fear. The church may not own your land, but it owns a piece of your soul and 1/10 of your income. 2, the tithe. They call it, that's after the Lord takes his share. What's left for you? Maybe half, on a good day. If a weasel hasn't eaten your grain again, the manor looms ahead like a smug stone toad. Not a castle, exactly, but more than a house. 2 stories with a chimney taller than your whole hut. There's a dovecote filled with plump birds you're not allowed to touch, and a fish pond that glimmers with fat. Lazy trout you'll never taste. The irony is thick enough to spread on rye. You pass a group of men loading sacks of grain into a cart. That grain came from your field. They didn't even pretend to weigh it this time. You make a mental note to dig your own secret storage pit next season, just deep enough to hide a small stash. Everyone does it. Everyone lies about their yield. If you tell the truth, you go hungry. If you lie and get caught, you go to the pillory. Choices inside the manor hall. The steward takes your offerings with an expression that suggests he's doing you a favor. He frowns at your carrots. You smile sheepishly and say they're from your best bed. He sniffs. Thin, he mutters, like your excuses. You resist the urge to mutter something back. There's a ledger, a big, leather-bound beast of a book, ink-stained and ominous. Your name goes in it, a tally of your dues, your yields, your fines. Last season, you were docked for unauthorized use of the forest, which is fancy talk for collecting firewood in winter to not die. Very rebellious of you. And let's talk about that forest. It's right there, dark and ancient, a 5-minute walk from your hut. But the trees aren't yours. The deer belong to the Lord. The nuts, the mushrooms, off limits unless you pay a fee, which you can't afford. So, like everyone else, you sneak in at dawn or dusk, avoiding the gamekeeper who once knocked out a boy's tooth for picking berries. Historians still argue whether these restrictions were enforced strictly everywhere or only in certain manners. Some lords were lenient, others seemed to take pleasure in starvation. Yours falls somewhere between petty and cruel. Back outside, you pass the communal oven where the baker charges you to use it. Yes, you're taxed for baking your own bread with your own flour in an oven you helped build. There's a fee called banalité, a delightful little rule that says, the Lord owns the only legal oven, mill, and wine press. You want to grind grain at home? Too bad. Illegal. You bake in secret? Risky. One woman was caught doing that last year. She had to stand in the village square with a sign that read, "Thief of the Lord's fire." Harsh? Yes. Effective? Also yes. You stop by the mill on the way home. You've got a small sack of barley, and the miller gives you a crooked smile. 1/6, he says. That's his cut, another tax. In practice, if not in name, he's the Lord's man. After all, you watch a few of your hard-earned kernels vanish into the sack marked reserve, then sling the remainder over your shoulder. Your back protests. It always does. And still, somehow, you're not done with obligations. There's the corvée, unpaid labor owed to the Lord. A few days each week, you stop working your own field to help dig ditches, repair roads, or build the new grain barn. You do it because you have to. Refusing is not an option. One time, your cousin feigned illness to skip corvée. He spent 3 days in the stocks, sunburned and pelted with rotten apples. You finally make it home. And your mother asks, "Did they take the eggs?" You nod. She sighs, then starts chopping leeks. You don't ask if there's anything else for dinner. It's dark by the time you're finished with chores. You've milked the goat, patched the chicken coop, and rethatched part of the roof using straw borrowed from the Lord's field. No one saw. You think, you hope. Your little sister is drawing shapes in the dirt. She looks up and asks, "Why does the Lord get everything?" You pause, then you say, "Because he has everything to take." It's not an answer, really, but it's true. Later, as you lie in bed and stare up at the smoke-streaked rafters, you wonder what it would be like to own even a piece of land, a scrap, a corner. You imagine planting whatever you want, when you want, maybe even keeping all the carrots. Wild fantasy. But instead, you close your eyes and try not to think about next rent day. It's always closer than it seems. The sun hasn't yet cleared the horizon, but you're already out in the field, your hands gripping the wooden handles of the plow. The oxen snort clouds of steam in the cold morning air. They're sluggish this early, just like you, but unlike you. They don't get opinions. You click your tongue and give the harness a tug, and with a groan that sounds oddly human, the beasts lurch forward, dragging the blade through the stubborn clay. Plowing is no romantic pastoral image. It's a fight. The ground is hard, uneven, full of stones and ancient roots that seem to twist just to spite you. Your shoulders scream with each jolt. The plow bucks like a wild boar in mud, and you have to keep it steady unless you want to end up redoing the row. Again, you envy the oxen, just a little. They get to plod forward, slow and steady, oblivious to taxes, rent, and that weird rash on your foot. You mutter to them, half curse, half encouragement, as you steer them through another crooked furrow. The wooden yoke creaks ominously. You're not sure which will give out first, the oxen or your spine. You weren't always behind the plow when you were younger. You scattered seed by hand, trailing your father with a leather satchel full of barley and rye. Back then, the field seemed endless, the work like a game. You'd compete to see who could throw the furthest. Now, every step just reminds you how badly your knees are aging. The soil in your region isn't generous. It's heavy, wet, and packed with chalky lumps. When it rains, it turns to glue. When it's dry, it cracks like pottery. You've learned not to expect miracles. The harvest depends on everything going right. The right amount of sun, not too much rain, and no surprise visits from rats, beetles, or God's judgment. And still, every spring, you return to the same patch of earth and try again. Because what else is there? Your plow isn't fancy. It's mostly wood, tipped with a bit of iron at the end, blunt and dented from too many rocks. You once saw a traveling merchant with a new iron plowshare, all shiny and sleek. He said it was the future. You said, nice, and went back to coaxing your patchwork contraption through dirt that hates you. Historians still debate how widespread heavy plows were in medieval France. Some regions adopted them earlier, some later, and others stuck with the old scratch plow for far too long. Yours? Let's just say you're not exactly at the cutting edge of agricultural innovation. As mid-morning arrives, you wipe your forehead with your sleeve. You've gone through one tunic this month already, split it right down the back trying to lift a sack of rye. This one smells like mildew and wet dog, but it's holding together. For now, you pause to check the oxen's hooves. One's got a split starting. You make a mental note to wrap it tonight. Using that bit of cloth you've been saving, you pat the beast's side, and it shifts its weight, nearly stepping on your foot. You manage to hop back just in time. Barely. The work continues row by row, your body finding a rhythm even as your mind drifts. You think about the song your grandmother used to sing while threshing, something about St. Martin and a magic cow. You only remember half the lyrics. You hum it anyway, anything to distract you from the ache crawling up your back. Your neighbor Arnaud plows the next field over. He waves, then leans on his plow for a second, stretching his arms. You both know the pause costs time, but sometimes you need to remind your body it still belongs to you. Dry for March, he says. You nod. Too dry. That's the extent of the conversation. There's nothing more to say. You both know the consequences if the weather doesn't change. A dry spring means poor germination. Poor germination means empty bellies. And empty bellies, well, you've been there before. By noon, you stop for a break. You sit on a rock near the edge of the field, unwrapping a crust of barley bread and a piece of onion. You eat slowly, letting the sun warm your shoulders. A robin hops nearby, pecking at something invisible. You toss it a crumb. It ignores you. You think about harvest time, about the scythes flashing through golden fields, the scratch of grain against your palms, the way the straw cuts your fingers. But you keep going anyway. Harvest is frantic joy. You work until your legs go numb, just to get it all in before the weather turns. You've seen it rain for 3 weeks straight in late August, turning ripe grain into a sour, sprouting mess. You wept that year, quietly, behind the shed, where no one could see, and yet, you keep doing it, plowing, sowing, weeding, praying, every year, like clockwork, even when the clock is broken and full of mud. Because that's what survival looks like here. Not glory, not progress. Just getting through. In the distance, you see smoke rising from a brush fire. Controlled, you hope. Last year, a spark from a careless hearth burned half a field. The fire moved faster than a rumor, and all anyone could do was slap at it with wet sacks and pray. You still dream about the crackling. The oxen snort again. Restless, you rise and stretch. Every bone complains. You take the plow handles once more and nod at the beasts. Time to finish the furrows. You've got 3 more rows to go before dusk, and you need to get them done before the chickens wander in and ruin everything with their dainty little feet. As you turn the plow, your boot sinks into a patch of soft earth. You almost twist your ankle but catch yourself. You laugh, a dry, brittle laugh, because of course you did. Of course. By the time you reach the last row, your arms are trembling. You smell like sweat, dirt, and beast. The oxen are wheezing. You both deserve a better life, but here you are. As the sun dips low, casting long shadows across the furrows, you step back and look at your work. It's crooked in places. There's a patch near the back where the blade barely scratched the surface, but it's done. For now. You lead the oxen home slowly, letting them take their time. You pass the same ditch you tripped in last week, and the same pile of stones you keep promising to clear. You won't. You're too tired. Back at the byre, you unhook the harnesses and wipe the sweat from the oxen's flanks. One of them licks your sleeve absent-mindedly. You let it. Later. By the fire, your mother asks, "Good day?" You shrug. It was... And somehow, that's enough. You wake to a sharp pain behind your eyes and a throat that feels like you swallowed smoke. Again. It's been 3 days now, and the fever isn't going anywhere. You sit up slowly, every joint protesting, and reach for the bowl of water near your bed. It's lukewarm and cloudy, but you sip it anyway. It tastes faintly of wood ash, and whatever your brother was doing with it yesterday, probably rinsing his socks. There's no doctor to call, no clinic to visit. You are your own triage nurse. Your mother is the chief herbalist, and the local healer is more rumor than resource. Her cottage, nestled at the edge of the woods, always smells like moldy rosemary and something vaguely alarming, like singed feathers. No one agrees if she's blessed or cursed, or both. You remember when your uncle came down with a cough that wouldn't quit. They tried leeches, 14 of them, left big. Purple kisses all over his chest. He died 2 weeks later, though whether from the illness or the treatment is still debated over every jug of cider. You're not sure leeches do anything besides look horrifying and ruin a perfectly good nap. Still, people swear by them. Leeches, poultices, prayers, bleeding, chants. If you're sick, you try it all. Because doing nothing feels like surrender. And if you do survive, well, everyone says it was the saints' doing, not the moldy garlic paste your aunt smeared across your chest. You drag yourself outside for air. The sun hurts your eyes. A neighbor waves from across the way, clutching a bundle of sage. "Burn this in your hearth," she calls. "Cleans the air." You nod. You tried that last year. All it did was make the hut smell like a campfire inside a salad. Today, you're supposed to help repair the thatch on the storage shed, but the way your head's spinning, you'd probably fall off and end up with a new hole in your skull. You lean against the wall and watch the village move around you. People hunched over chores, coughing into their sleeves, dragging baskets and water pails. Everyone's got some ailment. Everyone's got some cure. Most of them involve drinking ale, sweating it out, or thinking positively, which means praying louder. Historians still argue whether medieval people genuinely believed in humors, the idea that your body is full of 4 liquids that need to stay in balance, or if it was just the only medical theory they had, so they clung to it like a rat on a floating turnip. Either way, you've had enough black bile and yellow bile talk to last a lifetime, inside the hut. Your mother's boiling something in a pot that smells like sadness and onion peels. "Willow bark," she says, pushing the steam away from her face. "Good for fever." You sip it. Even though it tastes like wet twigs and disappointment, it helps a little. Maybe. Or maybe you just wanted to believe it would. Your grandfather had a different cure for everything. Vinegar for wounds, honey for burns, mud for bee stings, wine for everything else. He lived to be 70. Which around here makes him a wizard, a liar, or both. He used to say the best remedy was staying out of trouble. Hard to do when trouble is airborne. Speaking of which, you remember last year's outbreak. No one knows what it was. Fever, rashes, bleeding gums. But it swept through 3 villages. Half your cousins didn't make it. The priest said it was penance. You said it was a rat problem. You were both probably right. The local priest does double duty as a moral compass and a part-time medic. He knows a few Latin phrases, some copied remedies, and how to apply last rites with maximum drama. He's not useless, but he's no miracle worker. One time he tried to exorcise a cough by sprinkling salt water on a man's head. The man sneezed directly into his chalice. When things get really bad, people travel to shrines, holy wells, relic-bearing abbeys. A woman from your village once walked 4 days to see a thorn from Christ's crown, hoping it would heal her son's crooked leg. He limped home just the same. But she said the pilgrimage healed her soul. You smiled and didn't say what you were thinking. You lie back down in the straw, pulling your wool blanket up to your chin. You're sweating now. The fever's breaking. Or maybe you're just burning from within. Your skin itches, and your lips are dry. The goat stands nearby, chewing on something important-looking. Your sister brings you a mug of ale, flat and warm, but clean enough. It's safer than water, thanks to the boiling. You drink it slowly. It helps your head settle a little. You can hear the wind through the thatch, whistling like a flute made of ghosts. By late afternoon, you feel strong enough to move again. You help carry some firewood, ignoring the way your knees tremble. The fresh air clears your mind. Or maybe it just distracts you from the throbbing in your temples. You pass the healer's hut and see her stirring something in a blackened cauldron. She waves with 2 fingers, the other 3 stained green. You don't ask. Your friend Benoit once got a boil on his leg so large it had its own personality. The healer lanced it with a hot knife, then packed it with crushed garlic and spider webs. Yes, spider webs. She said it stopped the bleeding. It did. He still walks with a limp, but he's alive. Dinner that night is a thin stew with beans and leftover onion. You're grateful for it, even if your throat rebels. You sip slowly, pretending it doesn't taste like boiled sock. The family sits close, listening to your father tell a story about a knight who drank dragon's blood and never caught a fever again. You know it's made up, but for a moment, it feels true. You sleep early. Your body is tired in that deep, humming way that makes your bones feel like clay as you drift off. You hear your mother whispering a prayer, not to heal you, just to keep you here, to keep you longer. You don't believe in miracles, but you still hope you'll feel better tomorrow. The wind howls like a scorned widow outside your hut, and you already know it's going to be one of those nights, the kind that bites through your wool, seeps into your bones, and makes your teeth chatter in rhythm with the rattling shutters. You're wrapped in every scrap of cloth your family owns, and you're still shivering like a leaf in November. The straw bedding beneath you is lumpy and damp. Your feet are pressed against your brother's bony calves for warmth, and the goat is snoring suspiciously close to your face. Again, winter in medieval France doesn't come gently. It slaps. It creeps into the cracks of your hut and your body. And it doesn't leave until spring wheezes awake like an old man crawling out of bed. You pull your blanket, really just an old cloak with holes, closer to your chin. Your breath puffs white in the air, and the fire in the hearth has died down to a faint red glow. A few embers flicker weakly, struggling to hold on, like you. You don't want to move. Every muscle is stiff. Your back aches from yesterday's hauling. Your knees are locked, and your fingers are curled like claws inside your sleeves. But if you don't feed the fire, you'll wake up with frost on your eyebrows. Again, so you sigh, sit up slowly, and grope around in the dark for the kindling basket. It's nearly empty, just a few twigs and one sad half-burnt log. Still, it's something. You coax the fire back to life like it's a sulky cat. A few twigs here, a puff of breath there. A spark catches, then another, and soon you've got a flicker of flame lighting up the small space. You huddle near it, hands outstretched, as warmth slowly returns to your knuckles. It's not cozy, but it's survivable. And that's about the best you can hope for in months like this. Finding firewood isn't easy, not anymore. The forest just beyond the fields is full of branches, fallen trees, and dry brush, but technically, it all belongs to the Lord. And by technically, you mean he'll have you fined, flogged, or worse if you're caught taking so much as a twig without permission. You remember when your cousin tried to drag home a bundle of sticks and got stopped by the gamekeeper. The man took the wood, the rope, and his hat for good measure, called it compensation. You learn to get creative. Fence posts mysteriously go missing. Old tools get dismantled and fed to the hearth. Once, you burned a broken cartwheel and pretended you'd found it abandoned on the road. The trick is to not look too warm, because if someone sees smoke rising from your chimney, they might start asking questions you can't afford to answer. This morning, you're headed out to try your luck again. You bundle up in your heaviest cloak, the one that smells like mildew and old sheep, and slip out of the hut while the others are still curled up. Your boots are stiff with frost. One sole is coming off, so you tie it on with twine. You walk carefully, avoiding patches of black ice and frozen dung, each step crunching loudly in the stillness of the dawn. The village looks half asleep. Smoke curls lazily from a few hearths. You pass a neighbor hacking at a frozen log with a dull axe, his breath coming out in wheezes. He doesn't greet you. He's too tired. Or maybe his tongue is stuck to the inside of his mouth from the cold. At the edge of the woods, you find what you're looking for. A small copse of wind-felled trees hidden behind a thicket. You've been nursing this spot for weeks, taking a little at a time. Today, you go for a thicker branch, still damp but solid. You chip at it with your hatchet, the sound echoing like drum beats through the frosted underbrush. You work fast. Every minute out here is a gamble. If the steward's men catch you, you'll claim ignorance. Say you thought it was village commons. It's a lie, obviously. But lies are just survival, dressed in different clothes. By the time you've strapped the wood to your back with rope, your fingers are numb and your nose feels like it might snap off. You shuffle home as the sun peeks over the treetops, spilling gold over a world still stubbornly gray. Back at the hut, the fire is low again. You feed it the new wood with a sigh of relief. It crackles and smokes, spitting a few sparks onto the dirt floor. Your mother tosses in some dried sage from the rafters. She says it cleans the air. Mostly it smells like spicy dust. Still, it helps. Later, you help your father patch the barn roof with thatch and frozen mud. The wind cuts through your tunic like it's made of lace. You try to keep your hands moving, because if you stop for too long, the cold creeps up your arms like vines. Wrapping tight, your sister brings out a clay mug of thin ale. Warmed by the fire, you sip it like it's honeyed wine. Food is simpler in winter, thinner, blander, stretchier. You survive on roots, beans, and whatever was salted and dried back in autumn. Every bite tastes vaguely of dirt or mildew once in a while. Your mother adds a chunk of bacon fat to the pot, and it turns into a feast, just from the illusion of meat. Tonight's stew is cabbage, onion, and a sad turnip that looks like it lost a fight. You slurp it slowly, savoring the heat. Your little brother falls asleep in his bowl. Your father doesn't even scold him. He just smiles faintly and pulls a scrap of cloth over the boy's shoulders. After supper, the family huddles near the fire. No one speaks much. Words take energy, but you share space, and that's enough. You lean against the goat and close your eyes, pretending the smoke curling around your head is incense instead of desperation. Some nights, the wind shakes the shutters so hard, you're sure the roof will lift off like a pie crust. But it holds. You hold. Your family holds. And that's what winter is. Really, not a season, but a test of patience, of grit, of how long you can go without feeling your toes. You go to bed with your clothes still on, boots by the fire stuffed with straw, and your fingers wrapped in wool. You tuck yourself in next to your brother and pray your breath won't turn to frost. You dream of summer. Not beaches or sunshine, just grass that's soft, earth that's warm, and food that doesn't crunch unless it's supposed to. You survive the cold not with comfort, but with stubbornness. with hands chapped raw and eyes squinted against the wind, with stolen firewood, shared blankets, and the memory of a day when you didn't shiver, you don't thrive, you endure, and tomorrow, you'll do it again. The bells start ringing before sunrise, as always, pulling you out of sleep like a fish dragged from a pond. Your eyes are still crusty, your back feels like someone stuffed rocks into your spine, and the goat is using your shoulder as a pillow again. You groan and sit up. The air inside the hut is cold and smells like wood smoke, turnip stew, and something vaguely barnyard that you've stopped questioning. The bells' tolls echo through the village, deep, rhythmic, and impossible to ignore. You hear them every day, multiple times a day, like the heartbeat of your life, not just to call you to church, but to remind you who's in charge of your time, your guilt, and your eternal soul, the church. You throw on your tunic, a cloak, and your half-frozen boots. There's frost on the window shutter. Again, outside, the villagers are already stirring. The baker's boy yawns loudly as he carries a sack of flour. And old Mariette, the widow with the enormous eyebrows, is muttering prayers into the fog. You head toward the chapel, not because you want to. You're tired, sore, and honestly, your left foot might be turning into a lump of frost-bitten regret. But attendance is expected. Besides, it's St. Apollonia's feast day today, which means there might be warm wine and slightly stale bread afterward. And honestly, that's motivation. The chapel stands at the center of the village like a stern grandmother, solid, weathered, and always watching. The bell tower leans a little to the left. Inside, it's cold but smells pleasantly of old incense, wax, and damp stone. You dip your fingers into the holy water. It's icy. You consider that your penance for the time you stole a pear last week. Mass is spoken in Latin. You don't understand most of it. No one does, except maybe the priest. Still, you know when to kneel, when to stand, and when to look vaguely ashamed. The rhythm of it is comforting in a strange way. The chants echo through the chapel, wrapping around you like a thick, invisible blanket. You almost nod off twice, but manage to catch yourself before face-planting into the pew. Afterward, the priest gives a short lecture about sin, virtue, and the perils of laziness. You zone out a bit, thinking about whether the cheese in the cellar has molded past salvation. Then the bells ring again, and you're released, like livestock from a pen, back into the gray morning. Today is one of the many feast days that dot the calendar like little oases in a desert of toil. It's not just church, it's a small pause, a tiny exhale in the middle of endless labor. There are over 50 official feast days each year, and depending on the season and your Lord's tolerance, you might actually get to rest on some of them, but don't get too excited. Rest doesn't mean doing nothing. It just means doing slightly less. You help your mother prepare a simple offering for the shared meal after Mass, a loaf of barley bread and a small pot of leeks cooked in wine vinegar. It's humble, but no one expects a peasant to show up with roast goose and candied figs. That's for the steward, who shows up precisely at noon with his smug face and his embroidered tunic that definitely hasn't been washed in the river. The feast is held in the green by the chapel. There's music, if you count one guy wheezing into a set of pipes and a boy banging a pot lid. There's food, mostly roots, flatbread, and cheese hard enough to chip a tooth. But people are smiling, laughing, even for a few hours. The village feels human again. A girl from 2 cottages over catches your eye. She's got straw in her hair and a smear of soot on her cheek, but she's laughing so hard at a joke you didn't hear that she nearly drops her plate. You don't talk to her, not today, but maybe next time. The priest mingles among the crowd, sipping ale and blessing random elbows. He stops at your group and nods. "The Lord provides," he says, gesturing to a plate of cold lentils. You nod solemnly, wondering if the Lord might provide something with actual flavor next time. Later in the afternoon, you return to your daily chores. Holy days don't stop animals from needing feed or fences from falling over, but the work feels lighter somehow. You hum a hymn under your breath while mending a chicken coop. The song's about St. Cuthbert taming a wild beast with a prayer. You imagine trying that with the rooster who keeps attacking your ankles. Doesn't seem promising. By evening, you gather again with your family for prayers. Your father leads, reciting from memory. You cross yourself at the right moments, mutter the right words. You're not sure what you believe exactly, but belief is like bread, thin, simple, and necessary. You remember when your neighbor's son was born sickly and didn't survive the week. The priest said it was God's will. Your neighbor didn't argue. He just nodded and stared at the ground like it might offer an explanation. There's always guilt humming under the surface of things, not just for what you've done, but for what you haven't done. For working on a Sunday when you needed food, for falling asleep during Mass, for envying your Lord's cloak, even though it's the ugliest shade of green imaginable. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were truly devout or simply terrified into obedience. You think it's both. Fear and faith walk hand in hand around here. You pray because you believe, or because you hope, or just because you're scared of what happens if you stop. As the sun sets, the chapel bells toll again. You pause, listening. You've heard those bells every day of your life. They signal work, rest, prayer, celebration, mourning. They're your calendar, your clock, your conscience. Inside, your mother lights a tallow candle. Its scent is smoky and faintly rancid. You huddle near it anyway, watching the flickering flame. Your sister murmurs a bedtime prayer, her voice soft and sleepy. Before bed, you stare up at the dark beams of the roof and whisper a prayer of your own, not for wealth or glory, but just for another quiet morning, another warm bowl of soup, another day where no one gets sick and no one is taken too soon. The bells will ring again tomorrow, and you'll get up, you'll kneel, you'll work, you'll hope, you'll carry your guilt like a satchel, worn but familiar, and if you're lucky, the Lord won't be paying too much attention. You don't remember a time when you didn't work, not pretend work, the kind where you hand a grown-up a wooden spoon and they smile at how cute you are. No, you're talking about real work, hauling buckets, weeding fields, feeding livestock that are bigger than you and far less cooperative. Your memories of childhood are less playing in the sunshine and more trying not to get kicked by a donkey while fetching water. You were probably 6 when they handed you your first serious chore. It was the chickens, you think, or maybe carrying stones for the new well. You were small, so the older kids laughed when you tried to lift a pail half your size. You cried the first time. You learned not to after that. Childhood, in the village, is a brief and fragile thing. You get a handful of years to run wild. Maybe 4 or 5 if you're lucky, before you're expected to contribute. Not because your parents are cruel, but because survival doesn't wait for anyone to grow up. Everyone works. Everyone pulls their weight, or they don't eat. That's assuming you even make it to childhood. You've lost siblings before they had names. Fevers, diarrhea, coughs that never went away. Little things that future people might laugh off with pills and hot soup were death sentences here. Your mother stopped naming babies too early. Not out loud. Anyway, she said it hurt less that way. You remember when your youngest brother died. He was barely 2. Just starting to talk. One morning, he wouldn't wake up. The priest said it was God's mercy. Your father didn't speak for 3 days. You watched your mother tear her apron in half and bury it with the child, as though a piece of her needed to go with him. Maybe it did. Those who survive their toddler years enter a kind of blurry apprenticeship. You learn by doing, by watching, by being corrected loudly when you mess up. You get blisters from the rake. You learn how to spot blight on potatoes. You figure out how to gut a fish without cutting your fingers. You don't get a gold star for effort. You get a nod, or, if you're lucky, a scrap of cheese. There's no such thing as school for most peasant kids. You might learn to count a little, maybe how to say your prayers, and if your family is particularly ambitious, you could get a cousin to show you how to write your name. But books, pens, parchment, those are for priests and lords. You've got dirt, sticks, and whatever you can scratch into the mud. There's a strange pride in being capable so young. You see it in the way your neighbor's daughter, who's barely 7, herds geese with the authority of a war general, or how your own little sister can spin wool while humming a song about Saint Genevieve and still slap your hand away when you try to steal a fig. But there's also sorrow hiding in the corners. Childhood ends early, and it ends quietly. There's no ceremony, no birthday, no pat on the head. One day you're chasing frogs with bare feet, and the next you're carrying manure in a bucket twice your size. You don't even notice the change until your back starts to hurt, like your father's does. You've seen kids your age collapse from exhaustion. You've seen them get kicked by oxen, burned by soup kettles, stung by bees while trying to collect honey. There's no safety net, just hope and tough luck. One boy, Etienne, lost an eye when a tree branch snapped while he was climbing to fetch a squirrel's nest. He showed up to work the next day with a rag tied around his face and a smile. "Now I only need to blink half as much," he said. Everyone laughed. You did too, though your stomach turned. Historians still debate how much medieval peasant children worked compared to adults. Some argue they were given more leeway, more time to play. Others say the brutal demands of rural life left no such luxury. You lean toward the latter. Play happens. Sure, but in the cracks between chores. And often, play is chores, just framed with imagination. Pretending the laundry pail is a ship as you drag it uphill, turning weeding into a competition, finding joy in spite of it all. There's one game you remember fondly, chasing each other through the hayfields with sticks and pretending to be knights. You didn't know the rules, just that hitting someone with a branch meant you'd won. You got a black eye once. Your mother gave you a lecture and a hunk of bread. You still think it was worth it. But not everyone survives those games. A girl named Yvette fell into the well while playing hide and seek. They pulled her out too late. After that, your village elders warned everyone, play near the animals if you must, but not near the water, and never near the fire. You listened, mostly. Girls, especially, have their childhoods clipped short. By the time they're 12, they're often betrothed, 14 or 15, married, children of their own. Your cousin was married at 13. She didn't smile at her wedding. No one asked her to. One day, you'll be married too. Maybe to someone you know, maybe not. Your parents will decide. It's not about love, it's about survival, land, and lineage. You'll get a piece of cloth, a loaf of bread, and a candle for the ceremony. And then you'll start your own hut full of straw, fleas, and prayers tonight. After dinner, onion soup and flatbread. Barely enough for 5. You lie beside your siblings and stare at the ceiling. The fire flickers low, casting shadows across the rafters. You hear your younger sister whispering to herself. Maybe a prayer. Maybe a song. You smile in the dark, because even if childhood here is short and bitter, it's still yours. And every stolen laugh, every frog chase, every moment of play is a little rebellion against the life that's already claimed your back and your hands. Tomorrow, you'll rise early, carry a bucket, and pretend your knees don't ache. But tonight, you're still a child, if only for a few more hours. You hear the sound of crying before you even open your eyes. It's thin, strained, and oddly rhythmic. At first you think it's a cat or a goat with a cough. Then you remember, today's the day. Your neighbor's daughter, Colette, is in labor. You groan, not out of annoyance, but from sheer empathy. Childbirth here is not the soft focus miracle future people like to imagine. It's not candlelight and lullabies. It's groaning, bleeding, praying, and hoping no one dies in the process. Because honestly, someone often does. You drag yourself out of bed and throw on your cloak, outside. The sky is just starting to lighten. There's a thin sheen of frost on the ground, and the air smells of wood smoke and anxiety. You follow the sounds to the neighbor's hut. The door's slightly ajar, and warm light flickers inside. You peek in and see half the village women already crammed into the one-room space. The midwife, a woman known simply as Tante Elise, is crouched near the straw-covered bed. She's got her sleeves rolled up and her hair tied back with a strip of linen. Her hands are stained with something dark, and her face is as calm as ever. You've seen her deliver 10 babies, treat 3 broken legs, and slap a priest for interrupting a birth. She's terrifying and deeply beloved. Colette is moaning, her face damp with sweat. Her husband is outside, pacing in tight circles like he's lost a coin in the grass. Men aren't allowed inside, not because of modesty, but because they're usually useless in a birthing room and too likely to faint at the wrong moment. You've never given birth, but you've helped enough to know the signs. The baby is coming fast, too fast. Maybe. Colette looks pale. The air inside the hut is hot, heavy, and tinged with the metallic tang of blood. A candle flickers in the corner. It's the only light they have, but also a symbol, keeping darkness, spirits, and fear at bay. You sit beside one of the other women and begin your job, boiling water, handing rags, offering whispered reassurances that feel laughably hollow. There's no real comfort to give, just presence, just hands. The birth stretches on for hours. The baby comes breech, which means feet first. Tante Elise curses under her breath in a mix of Latin and village slang. She works quickly, expertly, her face unreadable. She tells Colette to push, harder, again. Then comes silence, then a scream. Not from the mother, but from the newborn, a baby girl. Everyone exhales. The midwife wraps the infant in cloth, swaddling her like a loaf of bread, and hands her to Colette. The mother smiles faintly, eyes fluttering. She's exhausted. She might sleep for a day, or not wake up at all. That's always a possibility. You hope not, you pray not, you clean up the rags, now stained deep brown, and pour out the water into the grass behind the hut. The steam rising from the bowl looks oddly holy in the early morning light. Childbirth is dangerous at the best of times. But in your world, it's like juggling fire while blindfolded. There are no doctors, no sanitation, no pain relief beyond biting a strip of leather or clutching someone's hand until you nearly break it. You've heard of noble women who give birth lying on feather-stuffed cushions, attended by trained physicians with herbs and silks. You've also heard that they die just as often as peasant women, maybe more. They're not used to pain. The midwife returns to check on Colette every hour. She'll stay nearby for a few days, just in case, if there's retained blood, fever, or swelling, none of which she can truly fix. She'll try poultices and prayer. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Historians still argue whether medieval midwifery was more superstition than science. But out here, it's all you've got. And Tante Elise knows more than most. You trust her more than the priest. Later, you help gather herbs from the garden, yarrow, lavender, and comfrey. You also dig up a bit of garlic. Everything has a use. Lavender to soothe, comfrey to help with healing, and garlic. Well, garlic is for almost everything, especially when you're out of options. You think about marriage, about babies, about how inevitable it all feels. You've seen girls your age, barely 14, married off to boys who smell like old turnips and speak in grunts. You've watched them fade under the weight of it. Not just the babies, but the housework, the expectations, the never-ending rhythm of give, give, give until there's nothing left. Your parents will arrange your marriage someday. Maybe next year, maybe sooner. It's not about love. Love is a luxury. It's about alliances, farmland, dowries, and shared buckets. If your husband doesn't hit you, feeds you, and doesn't gamble away the goat, he's considered a prize. Romance is for songs, not huts with leaking roofs. You've heard the stories. A young noble fell in love with a milkmaid once and tried to run away with her. They were caught. He was sent to a monastery. She vanished. Maybe it's true, maybe not. But the story gets passed around every winter like a warm cloak. People want to believe. Marriage in the village means joining a life of labor to another. You'll share fields, chores, and eventually, children. You'll lie side by side in a straw bed, whispering about grain yields and whose chicken laid more eggs. You'll grow old together, if the fever doesn't get one of you first. That night, you light a small candle by your bed and whisper a prayer to Saint Margaret, protector of childbirth. Not for yourself, not yet, but for Colette, for the baby, for every girl who enters that birthing hut not knowing if she'll come out. You watch the flame dance, casting shadows on the smoke-streaked beams above your head. Somewhere nearby, a baby cries, alive, full-lunged, and demanding to be heard. It's a good sign. You smile in the dark, because in a world that doesn't promise much, a crying baby at dawn feels almost like hope. You're hauling a basket of turnips back from the garden when you hear shouting from the village square. Not the usual kind, either. Not squabbles over whose goose pecked whose laundry. This is sharp, loud, and laced with that edge of gleeful panic that only happens when someone's about to be publicly humiliated. You turn the corner and see a crowd gathering around the ducking stool. Oh no, not the stool. Again. At the center of the gathering stands Leon, the Reeve, your lord's appointed enforcer of village rules, taxes, and general bad vibes. He's short, built like a barrel, and always seems just a little too happy to catch someone stealing, lying, or muttering suspiciously near the mill. He's got a voice like gravel and a stick he calls justice. Everyone else just calls it the stick. Today's unfortunate soul is Perrine, the alewife's daughter, caught, allegedly, watering down the beer she sells on Sundays. Now, sure, you've had her ale, and yes, it's thin, but it's wet and it doesn't kill you. And in your book, that's a win. Apparently not in Leon's. The ducking stool is an old contraption, basically a long wooden beam balanced on a post. With a rope and a chair at the end, you sit the accused in the chair, swing it over the village pond, and dunk them like a misbehaving biscuit, sometimes once, sometimes 5 times. Depends on the mood, or the crowd, or the phase of the moon. Who knows? The crowd jeers half-heartedly as Perrine gets tied in place. She's rolling her eyes, muttering something under her breath that definitely sounds like a curse. The Reeve dramatically waves his arms and lists her offenses, all while trying not to fall into the pond himself. Then comes the splash. You wince. Duck pond water in summer is basically swamp soup, full of slime, duck droppings, mystery bubbles, and the occasional eel. You see Perrine come up sputtering, spitting out what looks like half a lily pad. She gasps, "Tastes better than my ale." Leon. The crowd howls. Even the Reeve chuckles before dunking her again. Punishment here isn't just about crime, it's about example. If someone breaks the law, steals a chicken, slanders a priest, or bakes bread on the wrong day, justice is public always. Because what's the point of punishment if no one sees it? You've seen worse. Stocks for a whole day under the sun, feet locked in place, arms through a wooden beam while flies and children take turns attacking you with moss and half-eaten apples. Once, A man was strapped to a fence with pig guts until he admitted to stealing eggs. He confessed. Of course, he did. Pig guts are persuasive. Justice here is immediate, visible, and a little bit theatrical. There are no lawyers, no long deliberations, just accusation, witnesses if you're lucky, and then sentence. If it's a village matter, the reeve or elder handles it. If it's serious enough to go to the manor court, well, then it gets really dramatic, sometimes with gallows. You try not to think about that. One time, you remember a boy being accused of witchcraft because he had a wart shaped vaguely like a toad. The priest gave him a stern talking to in a bowl of holy water. The wart stayed, but the rumors faded eventually. Mostly, superstition blends with law here, like soup blends with stew. There are rules you can understand. Don't steal, don't lie, pay your taxes. And then there are the unwritten ones. Don't whistle at night. Don't walk widdershins around the chapel. Don't leave a loaf of bread upside down. Break those, and you won't be dunked. You'll just be watched. Historians still argue how much authority local village officials had versus the broader manorial court system. Some say reeves were mere errand boys. Others paint them as miniature tyrants with unchecked power. You know one thing for sure. Léon enjoys his job a little too much. By late afternoon, the spectacle is over. Perrine is soaked, shivering, and loudly declaring she'll never sell ale to Léon again. Even if he begs, the crowd disperses, half bored, half amused. Someone plays a tune on a broken flute. The priest nods solemnly and mutters something about temptations of the flesh and the barley. You return to your turnips, which now feel somehow anticlimactic. But punishment doesn't always come with a stool and a speech. Sometimes it's whispered behind doors. Your cousin Jean was once caught poaching a rabbit from the Lord's forest. He wasn't dunked or flogged. He just stopped getting work. People stopped inviting him to feast days. The silence was louder than any ducking, and sometimes justice is personal. Petty revenge passed off as order. You know someone who lied about a neighbor's goat just to get access to her well. It worked. The goat got blamed for trampling cabbages. The well changed hands. Welcome to Law and Order, Medieval Edition. You sit by the fire that night, sharpening a stick with a dull knife and replaying the scene. Perrine, dripping and defiant. Léon, smug and puffed up. The crowd, hungry for entertainment. You wonder what it would take for someone to dunk him. Then you realize no one could. He answers only to the Lord, and the Lord is too busy counting grain. You glance at your mother. She's sewing, lips pursed. Don't get ideas, she says. Without looking up, you hadn't said anything, but she knows. Everyone knows. Justice here is survival. You obey the rules. Not because they're just, but because they're bigger than you. As you lie down that night, you try to sleep, but your mind lingers on the ducking stool, on the stocks, on the stories of people locked in towers or branded with hot irons. You wonder what tomorrow will bring, who will be accused, who will be caught, who will be watched. Because even if you've done nothing wrong, you're always one unlucky day away from being the one in the chair, and pond water doesn't forgive. The day begins in silence, too much silence, the kind that makes you suspicious. No geese honking, no distant clatter of buckets. Even the chickens are unusually well behaved. You step outside, boots crunching softly on frost-stiffened grass, and immediately spot the reason. Marthe is out again. She stands alone by the village well, wrapped in a tattered shawl that might once have been green. Her hair sticking out like straw that lost an argument with the wind. She's staring at something on the ground. It might be a root, it might be a bug, or, knowing Marthe, it might be an omen only she understands. You can practically feel the collective breath-holding of the village around you. Marthe is what you might call peculiar. Not dangerous, at least. Not openly. but definitely the kind of person people speak about in lowered tones after dark. She talks to cats. She claims to dream of storms before they arrive. And last month, she insisted her bread wouldn't rise because a raven gave her the evil eye. You're not sure if she's touched by the saints or just a little too fond of wild mushrooms. But either way, she's on everyone's mental list. That list doesn't have a name, but you know it. The watch them closely list. People who are just different enough to make others uncomfortable. People who collect bones, walk backwards during eclipses, or hum to themselves in Latin they probably don't understand. Marta ticks every box. You pass her with a polite nod. She doesn't respond. Her lips are moving soundlessly. You don't ask what she's saying. Later that morning, you see someone has nailed a small bundle of nettles, rosemary, and red string to Marta's door. A ward, a warning, maybe both. You recognize the work. Old Agnes, the herbalist, likes her wards to be dramatic. She says they set the tone. That's when the whispering begins. She dried up the miller's cow. Someone mutters near the oven. The beast went dry after she looked at it. She cursed the midwife's boy. He's been coughing ever since. I heard she keeps a toad in her bed. You don't know which part bothers you more, that people believe these things, or that they're not even being original anymore. You try to ignore it. You've got work to do, onions to dry, turnips to store, but fear has a smell. And today, it's clinging to everything, like smoke, like mold, like something that's been buried too long and dug up too soon. You were raised on superstition. Everyone was. It's baked into the bread, carved into the beams, whispered in bedtime prayers. Step over thresholds with your right foot. Don't thank someone for salt directly. Never name a baby before it's baptized. And never point at a rainbow. But most of it's harmless, ritual, tradition, little gestures to make the world feel less unpredictable. What's different, what's dangerous, is when superstition turns to accusation. You've seen it happen. It always starts small. A pot won't boil. A child gets sick. A storm blows the roof off the barn. People need someone to blame, and they never blame the priest, or the Lord, or chance. They blame women like Marta. You remember Brigitte, Agnes's niece, who once tried to sell love charms made from lavender and honey. She was caught placing one under a doorstep. No trial, no ducking stool. Just 3 days in the stocks and a sudden decision to move somewhere safer. You haven't seen her since. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers truly believed in witches or simply used the label to explain the unexplainable or to get rid of people they disliked. You think it's all three. Belief here is rarely about truth. It's about control. Fear keeps people obedient. It polices behavior better than any reeve. Who needs shackles when you have gossip? Who needs guards when your neighbors will gladly turn you in to protect themselves? That afternoon, the priest gives a sermon longer than usual. He talks about temptation, strange women, and how the devil often comes dressed in rags, with herbs in his hand and riddles on his tongue. He doesn't say Marta's name. He doesn't need to. Marta doesn't show up to Mass that evening. You're not surprised. A few people mutter that she's afraid of holy things. More likely, she's tired of people flinching when she passes. You find yourself defending her, quietly, to your mother. She's never hurt anyone, you say. She unsettles people, your mother replies, darning a sock with more force than necessary. So do ducks, you mutter. She gives you a look. That night, as you sit by the hearth, you can't stop thinking about Marta's lonely figure by the well, her muttering, the red string, the way everyone's ready to believe she's a danger, even if they can't quite say why. You've never feared Marta, but you have feared the silence that comes after someone is accused, the way no one speaks their name, the way their house becomes still, cold, empty. You crawl into bed and lie awake, watching shadows flicker across the rafters. Somewhere outside, an owl hoots once, then silence. Your sister whispers, "Did you see the way Marthe looked at Benoit?" You grunt, "He stepped on her foot." She didn't blink. You sigh. You're too tired to explain that sometimes people are just weird, that not blinking isn't a spell, that crows don't take orders, that bread sometimes fails to rise for perfectly mundane reasons, like forgetting the yeast, which, yes, has happened to you. But you also know your logic will lose to fear. Fear always wins. It's louder, hungrier, more contagious in the coming days. Marthe avoids the square. The children stop playing near her garden. The ward stays nailed to her door, and still. She walks, collecting herbs, muttering prayers, feeding the same black cat everyone says is her familiar. You don't know what's worse, that she might believe it too, or that deep down, part of you wonders, what if? So before you fall asleep that night, you whisper a little protection rhyme, not because you believe it, not really, just to be safe. Because in this village, you don't have to be a witch to be treated like one. You just have to be noticed. It begins, like most bad things in the village, with a smell, not the usual scent of damp straw, wet dog, or goat mischief, but something sharper, smoke, not the comforting kind that wafts from a hearth with stew bubbling nearby. No, this smoke has teeth. It chokes your throat, stings your eyes, and settles in your gut like a bad omen. You sit up from your bed of straw, instantly alert, heart already hammering, and then come the sounds, shouting, boots pounding the frozen mud, the distant clatter of hooves, the metallic jingle of armor. You hear men barking orders in French, but it's not your French. The dialect's wrong. The rhythm is off. You hear a voice say, "Open the door," and another say, "Don't wait for it." You already know what's coming. War is passing through, again. You grab your boots and shove your feet in without tying them, then dart toward the shutter. Outside, the sky is still bruised with dawn, but you can see enough. A column of soldiers trudging through the village road, carrying spears, torches, and the kind of confidence that only comes from knowing they won't be punished for what they're about to do. They're flying the colors of your local lord, technically. But you know these faces aren't from here. They're from another corner of France, or maybe even mercenaries, the sort who fight for coin, not cause. The sort who ask questions like, "Where's the bread?" before they ask, "Is this the right village?" You don't wait for them to reach your door. Your mother is already stuffing the last of the cheese into a cloth sack. Your father grabs the fire poker, not because he thinks he'll win with it, but because holding something feels better than holding nothing. Your little sister clutches a chicken like it's a stuffed doll. You all move in practiced silence. You've done this before. The cellar beneath your hut is shallow, damp, and filled with root vegetables and secrets. You crawl inside, crouching among the carrots, and pull the wooden hatch shut. You hear the boots before you feel them, the thump of someone walking directly overhead. Then a creak. The door. They don't knock. You hold your breath as someone rifles through your things. The chair scrapes. A cupboard creaks. You hear someone chuckle. Then something shatters. A plate? Maybe the jug? You imagine your straw mattress being flipped. You imagine them opening your bread box, taking the only loaf you had left for the week, and biting into it without even wiping their mouth. Above, you hear your father say something, calm, polite, pleading, then a shove, then silence. Eventually, they leave. You crawl out once the sun is properly up. Your mother is rearranging everything that's been tossed. Your brother is muttering curses under his breath while trying to fix the hinge on the door. Your father has a bruise on his cheek and a look that says, "Don't ask." The soldiers didn't burn the place down. That counts as a small victory. You walk through the village. It looks like it's been turned upside down and shaken. Cart tracks cut deep into the earth. Chickens squawk mournfully. Someone's goat has gotten loose and is chewing on someone else's laundry. The baker's flour sacks are ripped open, flour scattered like snow. You find your friend Alain sitting by the edge of the road, holding half a loaf of bread. He offers you a piece. It's already been stepped on, but you eat it anyway. And here's the thing, you're not even surprised. War has come and gone so many times that it's lost its edge. It's less of a shock and more of an inconvenience, like bad weather, or that one tooth you've been trying to ignore. Everyone has their coping strategy. Some pray, some hide, some just stand and wait for it to pass like a storm. But even storms don't steal your butter churn. By midday, the soldiers are gone, off to whatever battlefield or argument led them here in the first place. Historians will later try to trace their movements, map their routes, analyze their motivations. You could save them the trouble. They came because they were hungry, cold, and knew they could take what they wanted. That's all. You gather with others in the square to assess the damage. Old Henri had his door split clean in half. Mariette's daughter is missing 2 hens and her last pair of dry stockings. The priest is furious because someone drank all the sacramental wine and replaced it with ditch water. Your cousin swears she saw one of the soldiers take a bite out of a raw onion like it was an apple. You don't know whether to be horrified or impressed. You try to laugh about it, because what else can you do? But the laughter feels dry in your throat. It doesn't cover the hole in your grain sack. It doesn't make up for the lost butter. It doesn't warm the room where the door doesn't quite shut anymore. Later that evening, while repairing a fence they knocked over for no reason, your father mutters, "It's never about us." And he's right. These wars aren't for your land, your freedom, or your vote. They're for power, gold, grudges, and titles. Kings and barons playing chess with your life as the pawn. And even when they say they're fighting for you, it still ends with your dinner missing and your roof cracked. Historians still debate whether medieval peasants were mere bystanders in war or unwilling participants dragged into every conflict. From where you're standing, there's no debate. You're both, always. You remember when a boy your age tried to join a local militia, thought he'd protect the village, thought they'd give him armor. They gave him a stick and pointed toward the enemy. He came back with 2 fingers missing and eyes that never quite focused again. You help rebuild what you can. Everyone does. You mend the thatch. You replant the trampled herbs. You bury the burnt linens. Someone patches the chapel roof where an arrow got lodged. Even though there was no battle here, just passage, just interruption, just the cold shadow of war flicking through your lives like a wolf through tall grass. And when all's done, when the fences are upright and the door mostly latches and the chickens are coaxed back into their pen, you sit by the fire and exhale. You've survived another visit. It won't be the last. So you lay out your clothes for tomorrow, patch the sack with your last bit of thread, and whisper a quiet prayer, nothing grand, just something like, "Next time, let them pass us by." Then you go to sleep with one ear tuned to the wind, because it always begins with a sound. There's a heaviness in the air today. Not just weather, it's more than clouds and wind. It's that slow, silent weight that presses down on the village like a wet blanket. And you don't need anyone to say it aloud. You already know. It's back. Again. The plague. It always begins quietly. One child with a fever. A neighbor coughing longer than usual. A strange stillness where there used to be clatter and chatter. And then someone doesn't open their door in the morning. And then another. You wake to your mother leaning over you, her face pale and tight. She tells you to stay inside, that the blacksmith's wife is ill, that the priest won't say the word yet, but everyone's thinking it. You sit up slowly. You feel fine, but that doesn't mean anything. You look out through the shutter and notice the road is emptier than usual. No kids chasing chickens. No gossiping around the well. The baker's windows are shuttered. Someone's goat is still tied to its post, forgotten. You remember the last time? You were 10. It took your aunt, 2 cousins, and a man whose name you never learned. One day they were there, the next, gone. Their hut stood empty for a week before someone finally took their place. You step outside against your mother's orders and immediately regret it. There's a smell, not strong, not yet, but wrong, like wet cloth and bitter herbs. Someone has hung sprigs of thyme and rosemary around their door. A charm, a prayer. The midwife is walking quickly through the village, her apron smeared with something dark. She doesn't make eye contact. She's muttering a prayer under her breath. You pass a neighbor drawing a chalk mark on her door. 2 lines, then a cross. You don't ask what it means. You already know, inside. Your family prepares like they've done before. Buckets of water, bits of dried sage tucked into every crack. Your father sharpens his knife, not for protection, but for the grim work of butchering animals if food runs short and no one dares go to market. Your mother counts the onions in the root cellar like they're coins. Every one of them matters now. By the afternoon, the bell rings once, then again, then again. The village hasn't heard that pattern in months. 3 tolls, spaced slowly. Someone has died. The priest walks the road in full vestments, swinging a censer that gives off more smoke than scent. He's flanked by 2 boys carrying holy water and expressions far too serious for their age. They stop at the cottage near the stream. A cloth is hung over the door. No one goes inside. You learn later it was the cooper's son, 14, the same age as your brother, fevered one night, cold by morning. That night, no one eats much, even though your mother managed to cook a pot of lentil pottage with a bit of ham fat. The air inside your hut is thick with quiet. No one says plague, not yet. They say the illness, or the bad air, or nothing at all. Historians still argue about which plagues were which. Was it bubonic? Typhus, a flu that mutated? In the village? It doesn't matter. You don't have the names. You only have the coughs, the sores, the sudden stillness of someone who was laughing the day before. The next morning, your mother is gone. She's not sick, just helping deliver supplies to the family with the chalk-marked door. She leaves you with instructions not to touch anything, not to go anywhere, not to speak to anyone. You nod. You disobey 5 minutes later. You walk the road quietly, holding a kerchief soaked in vinegar over your face. You've heard that helps, or maybe it doesn't, but it gives you something to hold on to, something to do with your hands while your heart races. A woman is sweeping her doorstep with frantic energy. Her child watches from behind her skirt, coughing softly. A cart rolls by, a man pulling it. No horse, just him. You see 2 bodies wrapped in blankets in the back. He doesn't stop. You don't wave. You return home and scrub your hands with cold water and sage leaves until they smell bitter and your fingers are raw. Your father says nothing, just hands you a bowl of broth and tells you to drink it slow. That night, the wind picks up, the shutter rattles, the fire burns low, and then you hear it, the bell again, 4 times. You bury your face in your cloak and pretend you don't hear it. You pretend your stomach isn't turning. You pretend tomorrow will be better, but it's not. The next day, the baker doesn't open her door. Her son is crying. He doesn't know why she won't wake up. The priest doesn't come this time. Just the reeve and 2 men in heavy cloaks. They carry her out wrapped in a linen sheet. She's not the first. She won't be the last. You help dig a grave behind the chapel. The earth is hard, even though the frost is gone. Your hands blister. Your back aches. You keep digging. A crow lands nearby. You toss a stone. It doesn't move. You've heard stories of entire villages emptied by plague. of places so quiet birds built nests in the rafters of abandoned homes. You wonder if that will happen here. You wonder who would ring the bell for you. By the fourth day, your brother starts coughing. It's light at first, harmless. He says he's fine. He smiles. But you know that smile. It's the one you wore last year when your foot got cut and you insisted it was nothing. Until it wasn't. You sit by his bed, spooning broth into his mouth and whispering stories about foxes and saints. You don't know if he hears you. You don't know if it matters. Outside, life moves slowly. The birds still sing. The sun still rises. The goats still need milking. And still, the bell rings. By the seventh day, the bell tolls in the morning, the afternoon, and again just before dusk. It becomes a kind of rhythm, a slow heartbeat pulsing through the village, a sound you can't unhear. One toll, then two, then three, then silence, then someone else gone. Your brother's fever worsens. He doesn't speak much now. His breath comes in shallow gasps, and his skin is flushed hot, then suddenly clammy. You sit beside him, holding a damp cloth to his forehead. You change it every hour, even though it never seems to help. He squeezes your hand once, faint, almost unsure, and then slips back into sleep. Your mother says it's just a fever, that he'll get through it, but her hands tremble when she wipes his face. She avoids looking you in the eye. You know that look. It's the same one she had when your uncle didn't get back up. Outside, the village is quiet again, but not in a peaceful way. The animals are restless. The dogs bark at shadows. The chickens refuse to lay. No one is gathering at the well. No one is sitting in the square. Even the priest has stopped his daily walks. He leaves messages now, chalk-written prayers on doors, holy water in little pots, instructions to burn linens and stay indoors. Still, people slip out in the night. You see them moving through the fog, shoulders hunched, clutching baskets or firewood or bundles wrapped in cloth. Everyone's doing what they can to survive. Some light herbs and whisper incantations. Others pray harder. Some just stare out at nothing, eyes wide and waiting. You dream of funerals, not yours, not your brother's, but all of them, overlapping, bells tolling endlessly in your head. You wake to the sound of your own breath, gasping in the dark on the ninth day. Your brother opens his eyes and asks for water. You nearly drop the cup in your rush to bring it to him. He sips slowly. A good sign. Your mother exhales like she's been holding her breath for a week. Your father doesn't smile, but you see the corner of his mouth twitch. It's not over. But maybe, just maybe, he'll make it. You begin to hope again. The days that follow are slow and fragile. You go back to your chores in short bursts, half-focused, always listening for a cough behind you. You feed the goat, you sweep the floor, you check the root cellar and count the onions again. Still enough, barely. News trickles in from nearby villages. One to the west has lost half its people. Another has locked its gates entirely, turning away even their own. Some say there's a healer traveling on foot who carries a potion that wards off illness. Others say she's a witch. You don't expect to meet her. The dead are no longer buried in the chapel yard. The graves have spread to the edge of the fields now. Shallow ones, simple ones, wooden crosses if you have the time, a stone if you don't. One boy was buried with nothing but a shoe to mark his place. No one remembers his name. You help dig again, this time for a neighbor. He was old, kind. He gave you a goose feather once for no reason. You plant the cross gently, no prayers, just a silence that says more than words. Historians write about mortality rates, about the loss of population, the shift in labor markets, the decline of feudalism after plague years. But in the moment, standing over fresh soil with your boots caked in grief, you don't think about economics. You think about that feather, about his quiet smile, about how the village feels thinner now, like it's been hollowed out. Some people leave, not many, just enough to notice. A family gone, a house empty, a door swinging in the wind. One morning you see a cart vanish down the road, piled with children and quilts. You don't blame them. You wonder if they'll make it. You wonder where they'll go. And yet, somehow, things don't stop. The fields need weeding. The goat needs milking. Your brother, still pale and coughing, manages to eat half a turnip, a victory. Your sister begins singing again while sweeping, a cracked, reedy little tune, but it fills the room like spring air. A week later, the bell tolls just once, then it skips a day, then two. One morning, you wake up and realize the air smells of earth again. Not incense, not burning linen, not fear, just dirt, grass, and goat. You step outside and see your neighbor sweeping her step for the first time in weeks. The baker's boy throws a rock at a chicken, a normal thing. You laugh, a normal laugh. It feels strange in your mouth. Your family sits together that evening and eats stew that actually includes herbs and a bit of meat. You don't talk much, but you pass the bowl around 3 times. Your father drinks 2 cups of ale instead of 1. Your mother braids your sister's hair and hums under her breath. There's no big announcement, no proclamation. The plague doesn't end all at once. It just fades, like fog, slowly, hesitantly, leaving behind scars no one can see, but everyone feels. You walk to the chapel the next morning and sit alone. The priest enters quietly and nods at you. He lights a candle for the lost. You light one. 2. You don't say their names, but you remember. Life returns in bits and pieces. A rooster crows at the wrong time. A girl laughs too loud. A goat escapes again and leads half the village on a chase through the barley. Someone falls in the mud and pretends they did it on purpose. Laughter bubbles up, real this time. And when the sun sets, you sit by the fire, watching your brother breathe evenly. Your mother's hands move steadily through her sewing, and your sister doze off with her face smushed against the table. You're still here. You survived, somehow. In all that dust and silence and grief, you endured, and the bell, mercifully, does not ring. As the fire dies down to embers and the shadows stretch long across the walls of your little cottage, you sit quietly, listening to the soft breathing of those around you. The village, for once, is still. No shouting, no hooves on the road, no tolling bell. You wrap your blanket tighter and stretch out your legs, sore from digging, from standing, from simply carrying on outside. The wind moves gently through the trees, and somewhere in the distance, a single owl calls out, a soft sound, barely more than a whisper. You close your eyes and think of the turnips in the ground, growing silently beneath the soil. You think of the goat, snoring softly in its pen. You think of the empty chair by the hearth, and the many stories it has held. You've made it through another season, another storm, another silence, and now there is rest. Let your hands relax. Let your breath fall into rhythm, and let the quiet wrap around you like a familiar shawl. The road may be muddy, the roof may leak, but for tonight, just tonight, you are warm, you are fed, you are safe, and tomorrow can wait. Sleep now. Dear listener, the village will still be here when you wake. End of story. Sweet dreams.